Welcome to Design Thinking for Entrepreneurs, hosted by the Addison Public Library and created by Grow with Google. Grow with Google helps people grow their skills, careers, and businesses by offering free digital skills, training, and tools. I'll start by introducing myself as I just did. I'm Leslie, and I'm the business librarian here at the Addison Public Library. I'm so excited that you are here with us. Today, we're going to learn the principles of design thinking process and how to apply that process to create innovative solutions for identified problems. As I mentioned, my colleague Jody is here to help me. Please send any questions you may have via the Q&A and chat box, and she'll read those to me at the end. If there happens to be a question I cannot answer, don't worry. I will get your question off to the Grow with Google team and get you an answer as soon as possible. There is a handout to go along with today's presentation, and that will be emailed to you following the presentation along with the recording. So now that we've got that all taken care of, let's get started. We'll begin today's program by learning the 5 phases of design thinking process and how that process can help you to more effectively build products and services that address the challenges of your target audience. Then we will go through each phase of the process and discuss how you can apply those concepts to your own ideas, starting with the understanding your audience, identifying their challenges, and then crafting and testing the solutions we have for them.
So what exactly is design thinking? Design thinking is a methodology used by designers to solve complex problems. This approach has been used to brainstorm solutions for societal issues, like getting kids to eat healthy school lunches, as well as help established companies redefine their place in a fast-changing industry. You may use design thinking to come up with your first business idea. If you already have a business, you may use this methodology to improve an existing service, product, or even your website. Design thinking isn't just for coming up with the next great product or business. It should be an important part of how you connect with your customers now and in the future. Now, what is technologically and economically feasible can change depending on the context, of course. What we're able to create as a student over 4 years will likely differ from what you might be able to create if you had access to the amount of data or computing power that many larger tech companies like Google have. Even so, the important thing to keep in mind is that using design thinking process will provide you with a framework that will be useful even when you don't have a ton of resources available to you. And I'll show you a few examples of that later on in the workshop. So let's start talking about what this methodology is all about. The design thinking process was created by Stanford University and the company IDEO, and is being successfully used to create small projects and big ones. The methodology includes 5 phases, which we will see on the slides here. 1, empathize. In this phase, you will observe your ideal audience, engage with them, and immerse yourself in their challenges and needs. Good design is all about understanding the needs of your users. 2, define. In the defining process, you will express the problems of your users in the form of their points of view. Ideate. In the ideating phase, you will transition from identifying problems to finding solutions for those problems. 4, prototype. This phase is all about getting ideas out of your head and into the real world. 5, test. The last phase is all about testing. You can create the next iteration of the prototypes, test, learn, and iterate. You can continuous refinement is an ongoing process. So we talked about what the design thinking is and the phases of methodology, but how is design thinking used in practice? There are products you use every day that were created with design thinking process. Designers and innovators thought about you, the consumer, and the needs or challenges you had around your everyday activities to make the products and services you buy and use better. Let's take a look at some examples. Many of you are likely watching a lot of on-demand television right now from streaming services or your cable provider. Think about the challenges television watchers had prior to the introduction of on-demand television. You may have had to perfectly time when your favorite show was coming on or be home for it. Later, you may have had to set the timer on your VHS tape recorder. Perhaps you grew up with digital video recorders but still had to fast forward through the commercials. With each of these scenarios, there are pain points and challenges of the invention of on-demand television alleviates. You don't have to be home to watch your favorite program. No accidentally taping over your niece's dance recital VHS tape. And in many cases, on-demand services allow you to skip through commercials altogether. In our next example, almost all car owners can likely relate to the challenge you face when your arms are full of groceries, bags, or kids, and you're trying to get your car door or trunk open. If you apply the principles of design thinking process to this scenario, you can probably see where consumers have improvised in other similar scenarios. What might you use to keep the front door of your home open, propped when you have your hands full of groceries? Your foot, right? Design thinking was applied to the invention of foot activated car doors when designers understood a common challenge for car owners and the resources available to them in these scenarios: a free foot. Ride and home sharing might be some of those modern solutions to everyday challenges that you think of when you imagine the innovation that could come out of design thinking. Ride and home sharing brands were born from challenges we've likely all had. Maybe you were planning a family trip and wanted more space than a hotel room. Perhaps you knew you'd want a kitchen, or you just wanted a more local experience, so it made sense to rent a local homeowner's place. The same is true for ride sharing. While we all likely never thought we'd hop in the backseat of someone else's car, ride sharing has alleviated some big pain points in transportation. There aren't always taxis available in an area you're in. And if you're traveling internationally, ride sharing allows you to book transportation without understanding the local language or even having the local currency. Think about other things you use daily. Those innovations you couldn't live without, many of them have been created with design thinking methodology. Empathize. Let's start with the first phase of the design thinking process. The first step in design thinking process is to establish empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feeling of another person. If we want to focus on the user, our goal as we begin the design thinking process should be to first connect the user's stories, insights, and emotions. We must be able to put ourselves in their shoes, so to speak. What do we mean when we say user? Well, the user in design thinking should be the person or population for which you are hoping to build a solution. And when identifying the user, you want to be as specific as possible by adding more descriptions. Not just parents, but parents of toddlers or parents in New York City. It is also important to make sure you understand who your user truly is. If you are looking for a solution for college admissions, you may quickly say that your users are high school graduates. But when you stop to think about it, the user is actually the parents of high school graduates. This process helps you narrow down the characteristics of your potential audience so you can really dive into the core issues they may face. Think about the way you may have described your users or target audience in the past. Oftentimes, we start with demographic information such as gender, age, or nationality. Sometimes we consider one characteristic of an individual, such as parent or working professional. When it comes to your users, you want to be as specific as possible so you can really understand that the audience and what makes them tick. When you dig deep on their needs, it's easier to create a solution for them that they will jump on and the chance to benefit from. So let's look at some examples. You may say your target audience is women of color, but this is a huge group of people with endless number of unique interests and needs. Maybe you're looking to create an all-natural hair care line specifically for women of color. A more targeted explanation of your users would be women of color looking for products without added chemicals or toxins, or women of color who need to use natural products due to health or allergy concerns. You may have a handful of specific audiences, but these details will help you better market to them. Another example would be parents. But for the parents here, you likely know that there's a huge difference between parenting a newborn and a teenager. Also, as the designer, what problem are you looking to solve for parents? Maybe you offer nanny services and your audience is parents of young children not yet in school, or parents who work in demanding jobs. Maybe you market your products or services to seniors over the age of 70, but how can you get more specific? Let's say your product or service is for seniors who live alone. That would refine your marketing efforts to seniors over 70 and single-membered households. Lastly, let's look at Latinx college students as a potential user group. Latinx students make up a large group, but maybe you're offering temporary housing to college students. So instead, you should focus your efforts on Latinx students or their parents seeking temporary housing near universities in a specific geographic location. Now, depending on your business or idea, you might be thinking, my users can be from all different walks of life and they don't fall into any one demographic. This can be true if, say, you're an online counselor or you own a shoe repair business. In this case, think about what makes your audience unique. What qualities or interests do your users have that would draw them to your product or service versus someone else's? Find that niche that makes you unique. For example, maybe your shoe repair business offers 24-hour turnaround for repairs. Your ideal customer might include business travelers or people with an important event coming up. If you already have a business and you're unsure of who your users may be, you can use tools like Google Analytics or one of the library databases to learn more about your audience. Now let's try an activity. In this activity, you're going to step into the shoes of your user base and try to brainstorm at least 10 challenges they may face. Remember, try to first specify who these users are, like we just did a minute ago. Really put yourself in the shoes of your selected population and users and emphasize with their day-to-day process. Brainstorm all the potential obstacles they may come across. So now would be a good time to pull out your blank Google document, your piece of paper, and if you get stuck, considering starting from the morning till the evening and walk through their day as they identify challenges. I'm going to go ahead and turn on our calming music and start the timer. All right, our 3 minutes is up. Hopefully you've come up with a few good challenges. The second phase in our design thinking process is to define a problem statement. Now that we have a clearer image of our users in mind, we want to operationalize the problems. To do so, let's focus on one core problem from our list of challenges that we just created for our user. This core problem can be a synthesis of the list or just one that stands out the most. Using this core problem, we will begin creating a problem statement. So, what is a problem statement and why do we need it? The problem statement will be a succinct statement that clearly organizes one, the characteristic of the user, two, the user's needs or the core problem you just identified, and the insight into why the user is experiencing this need. Developing a problem statement is critical in the design thinking process. So let's look at an example. Now, this is a sample of a complicated problem statement, of a completed problem statement. Here we have our user, Sam, who is a busy manager. His need or core problem is that he needs a way to integrate healthy eating habits. The reason why he has this need or the insight stems from a desire to not feel like he's on a diet. The problem statement is telling us what we need to help Sam find some solutions that will integrate healthy eating habits for Sam without making him feel like he's on a diet. Pretty clear, right? It can be tempting to try to insert a solution during the problem statement stage of the design thinking process, but try to rein back on the urge until the ideation stage. Here we're pulling from our empathy stage to hone in on the true values of our user to tap into their true need. I want to share an important tip with you. Build the problem statement from the bottom up. The more insight you have into the emotions that are driving the need, the better positioned you are going to into the next step, ideating. So, Sam needs to learn about nutrition to get a better eating experience during lunch. Yes, we all know we should eat better. But why do so many diets fail? There's a lot of emotion and frustration in that feeling that you have to give up all the yummy foods you love. We know we need to eat better, but we don't want to feel like we're on a diet. So instead, Sam is a busy manager who needs a way to integrate healthy eating habits into his daily life because he doesn't want to feel like he's on a diet. Now it's your turn. In just a few moments, I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on your problem statement. Think back to your notes on your user base. Remember the list of challenges you came up with as you imagined life in their shoes. Now synthesize those challenges into a core problem that you will address for your user base into a problem statement. I'm going to go back to the previous slide and with your problem statement template and give you the example so you can refer to it as you craft your own statements. Working through this, if you have any questions, we're happy to take them through the chat or the Q&A. All right, after that activity, let's go into the third phase of design thinking process, ideating. I will say that's a word I always have trouble saying, so bear with me. So now that we've empathized with our chosen user, analyzed and synthesized those observations to define the problem using a problem statement, it's time to ideate, or in other words, create ideas. This is the phase where we think about all the possible solutions that come to mind. Here's a popular ideation activity used a lot in Google design sprints. We will have a time to do this activity in a few minutes. Using a Google Doc, insert a 2x4 table, or if you prefer, fold a piece of paper into 8 rectangles. In each section of your table or rectangle, I want you to write out a different idea on how to solve your user's problem. Maybe you'll have 8 new ideas. Maybe you'll have one new idea with 7 ideas that built upon that one idea. The point here is to practice letting loose and creating as many possibilities as you can. Don't worry about feasibility right now. Blue sky thinking is encouraged. Before we go to try the Crazy Eights activity, let's look at a few examples. The beauty of this process is that we can let our mind go wild with ideas. Let's go back to a few of our examples when we were discussing different user groups. First, we mentioned targeting women of color looking for natural hair care products. Now, you might already have in mind what type of products or services you want to offer your users. But in the ideating phase, it's all about considering all the different ways in which we can offer them a solution to their challenges. Your first thought may be to create an all-natural hair care line for women of color. On the other hand, you may consider not even offering a product to this user group, and instead alleviating their challenge with finding all natural hair care products through a database or app you create. Additionally, one of your ideas might be to be open a salon where you use all natural hair care products. One of the other examples of a potential user group include Latinx college students looking for temporary housing. The first idea comes to mind might be creating an online roommate matching service for Latinx students specifically. If you'd like to consider going into the product route for this group, you may also consider investing in buildings so you can furnish and offer them as temporary rentals to your user group. Now, the fun part of ideating is that we can really think outside the box. What if these students didn't need temporary housing because you created online learning problems for them to get college credit for their home? You see how the ideating phase can open your mind to new and different ways of solving problems for your target audience? Ideally, the recommended practice is to have an unlimited amount of time to engage in unrestricted brainstorming during this phase. But for the purpose of this 1-hour session, I'll pause for about 3 minutes so you can practice creating some ideas guided by the problem statement you just crafted. Remember, no idea is too crazy. What you might think of now could be something your competitor brings to life in the future. So you'll be ahead of the game if you recognize every possibility. Now it's time to prototype. I missed the slide. All right, that's better. Now, how do we know if these solutions are outlined in the last exercise would work? We prototype. Prototypes are inexpensive, scaled down versions of the solutions created in the previous ideation stage. As you build prototypes one by one, they are either accepted, improved and re examined, or rejected based on the user's experience. Remember, this is just an experimental stage. You aren't trying to create the workable product here just yet. This step is still crucial as you are testing out your ideas to gain as much feedback from your potential users as possible. Through the prototyping process, you'll gain a better understanding of the constraints inherent with the product feature and problems you may not have foreseen. You'll also have a more informed perspective on how real users would react and feel about the final product while they interact with the prototype. Once you've collected enough data from the prototyping stage, it's time to create the MVP, or the minimum viable product. This is what we call the simplest version of a workable product that is developed with the core features that will satisfy early adapters, but also provide the lowest risk for investors. That means the MVP should be cost effective and quick to develop while still providing the basic functions that you've decided on. And you'll have an idea of what your early adapters, or what we like to call first users that are eager to try something new, will be looking for thanks to the prototyping stage. So take a look at the picture in the slide here. So let's say your goal was to create a vehicle that could take you from point A to point B. In the top example, there are 5 boxes that represent each iteration of a prototype. The first iteration contains the image of a wheel. The second is 4 wheels with 2 axles. The third image is merely the base of a vehicle. The fourth is a built-out vehicle with no steering wheel. And the last prototype is a fully built-out functioning vehicle. Now, there isn't much you can do with just a wheel, or 2 wheels with an axle, or the body of a car without a wheel, or the engine. So the only viable product is the full functioning vehicle with all the bells and whistles. In the bottom example, we'll focus on an MVP that solves the problems of our audience in the simplest way, getting someone from point A to point B. The first image is that of a skateboard, which we know would get our audience from point A to point B. Now, for each step in the prototyping process, you may make iterations to the initial product as you get feedback on what works and what doesn't. In the second iteration, you may decide to change up the product slightly and make it a scooter. Or as you'll see in the third iteration, a bicycle. Perhaps your audience wants more speed and you end up with a motorcycle or a vehicle, but only after you've taken these MVPs through the prototyping phases to know what works and doesn't for your audience. Now, your minimum viable product is not your end goal. It's one of the many steps that will take you from your final established product. But to get to that point, you'll do what I'm sure sounds to you, as you know, in the design thinking process. I iterate and I iterate again. Keep testing your product or service with your user base and follow the feedback. Maybe that leads you to more challenges and enhancements. Maybe it takes you backward to remove certain features altogether. What's important here is that you are staying flexible and listening to the needs of your user base to create the best and most well-received version of your product or service. We won't prototype together in this virtual session, but following this class, you'll want to sit down and think about your options for a prototype. Pick one of your feasible ideas out of the 8 you came up with during the Crazy Eights exercise, and flesh out how you would build the solution to include the technology needed, time required, money needed, and resources that you might already have available to you. Last, but certainly not least, is the testing phase. This is the final stage of the design thinking process. We won't be practicing this phase together, but if you were to implement the design thinking process in real life, you would definitely want to test out your solution, evaluate it, and depending on how it goes, you may or may not go back and repeat the other phases. Testing is an iterative phase. So what does that mean? It means you continue to go back and make change, tweak features, and in some cases, you may even decide to scrap the solution for a different one you identified during the prototyping process. Now that you've learned the different phases of design thinking process, you might be wondering, how can you use design thinking to make a new idea more successful? Or take an existing business or project and tailor it to the changing needs of your customers, especially in today's climate. Let's look at an example. Sunrise Coffee. Juani Romero, a former barista, opened her first coffee shop on the first day of the Great Recession of 2008. She now owns 3 cafes. While Juani was initially hesitant to tackle new digital tools, her online presence became critically important when the COVID pandemic came to her city of Las Vegas. She knew she needed a way to keep her company solvent for the coffee shop, its employees, and the community. Wani had to look at the changing needs of her employees and customers. This time also brought new importance to supporting her customers and those first responders whose work was critical to the health of the community. Wani took her business almost entirely digital by selling her sustainability source beans online. She also added a web function that allowed visitors to donate coffee to the first responders and healthcare workers. And she would kick in 2 additional bags for each one donated. She was amazed at the response. Customers started flocking in droves and buying her coffee online. The media took notice as well. The sense of community and a desire to help others in the time of need was of new importance to Wani and her customers, and she redesigned her business to support those needs by leveraging new tools to deliver a different type of product and service to her audience. So, and that concludes the 5th stage of design thinking process. To recap the stages, they were to 1, empathize, where we stepped into the shoes of our user base to identify their challenges. 2, define, this is where we expressed a core program in the form of POVs, point of views. 3, we ideated, where we transitioned from identifying problems to brainstorming as many solutions as possible. Number 4, prototype, where we brought the ideas out of our heads and into the real world. And finally, the testing stage, which takes us to the next iteration of prototypes to improving our minimum valuable products by testing, learning, and iterating again and again. Give yourselves a pat on the back for following along. You did a lot of work in this session today. As you think about the iterative process of the design thinking method, here are some free resources provided by Google that can help you along your journey. If you want to sharpen your business and marketing skills, check out Primer. This is a free app you can download to your phone. If you have an Android device, you can download it at the Google Play Store. If you have an Apple device, you can download it from the Apple App Store. This is a series of short, fun lessons. They're all about 5 minutes each. You can access different lessons specific to learning to work from home or do business online by visiting the website you see on the page. Another great resource is the Google Quick Help videos. Get answers and learn how to make the most of Google's tools in just a few minutes. You'll learn things like how to get your business on Google Search and Maps, how to create a YouTube channel for your business, and how to start a Google Meet conference. There's a full playlist available at that g.co/grow/quick-help link. Grow your digital skills no matter where you're located. Through online workshops, like the one you're watching right now, you can learn skills that will help you stay connected and productive while working or managing a business remotely. Curious about the workshops you can take virtually from home? Visit g.co/growonair for currently virtual digital skills workshops and their descriptions. You can check out previous classes on Google Ads, using YouTube to grow your business, and Google Analytics. And without further ado, thank you so much for joining us. I am going to turn on my camera